Alrighty, welcome back. Gaming Memory Lane, this week, as well as the next few weeks, are all going to be about the arcades. We're going to be talking about a lot of the big games that made up the golden age of gaming, and this week our destination is one of my personal favorites of the arcades, is Dig Dug. Who remembers Dig Dug? You're the little blue guy with that white suit on, digging underground and blowing up the enemies or the monsters, whatever, with that giant air pump of yours. You blow them up until they pop, and then they're gone. You got more enemies. Dig Dug. Let's just jump right into it. Gonna keep the scheme that I've always been going. Do the facts first, and I'm gonna talk about my memories. So Dig Dug, as I said, came out in the golden age of arcade gaming. It actually helped make up that era. It was released in 1982. It was published by Namco, released by Atari. It was designed by Masahisa Ikegami. I have no idea how to pronounce his name correctly. Uh, it was originally released in Japan before it came over here to America. So it's a lot of these arcade games basically were, Japan's going to get it all first before we do here in the States. And the Masahisa, he received help from Shigeru Yokoyama, who is the creator of Galaga. I think I'm saying that right too. I've always called it Galaga. Because it was originally programmed for the Namco Galaga board by, oh god, this name here. Suchi Fukatani. I'm sorry. But that's the person who made the Namco Galaga board, and of course it received its own thing, its own Dig Dug arcade cabinet, as you've seen in the in the past. You still see them out in the wild, but other than that, it was originally made for kind of a port on an arcade machine that wasn't its own. But when it came out, Dig Dug received so many like positive input. It was very well received by critics, mostly for its addictive gameplay and its kawaii character design. Because that type of art style, that type of character design, that type of look was and still is very popular in Japan. That kawaii, cutesy looking art style. And it just says here it was one of the reasons why it became so well received, because it was a type of style that they're familiar with, a very addicting gameplay, and it's just a very cutesy game. It's a pick up and play style game. A lot of these arcade games were back then, but Dig Dug was a game that anybody can play. Like, all you just needed was a joystick to move your guy around and one button to use. It wasn't multiple buttons. It wasn't a controller. It was just that, plain and simple. You know, and it worked for the Atari, because that's what the Atari was back then, was one joystick and one button. And then you get Dig Dug on the NES, the Nintendo, and then I have ports of it, like it's been on the Namco Museum discs, so you can play it on like the PS2, the Xbox, the PSP. I even have it on the Pac-Man Championship collection or whatever on the PS4, so you can play it on your PS4, your PS5. I mean, here we are in 2026. The game was released in 1982, and you can still play the original version of it. So it's just like these old arcade games, like I mentioned in Pac-Man. Just like I mentioned uh, last week with Space Invaders. Like, you can still play these games just as the way they were. I believe Dig Dug is just like the other ones. You can go on your browser, go to Google, type it in, and probably play it right there with your keyboard. You know, but it was like I said in the beginning, it kind of helped with the golden age of arcade gaming. It was one of the biggest of its time, one of the biggest of that era. And in 1982, the same year it was released, it became the second highest grossing game in all the arcades. And by the end of 1982, so we're still in the year it released, it earned about $46.3 million. And So if you put it in like in the like inflation calculator to like today's money, today's currency, that's about 154 million dollars. In just the span of its year that it was released. It's still its launch year, it's still its release year, you know? The game's not even a year old yet. It's already accumulated that much money, which I believe it. I remember the first time playing Dig Dug on the Atari. I remember being a kid. I think my mom, she kept her Atari from when she was a kid, and she brought it up to me. And Dig Dug was one of the games I played, and I fell in love with it immediately. Like it's a fun game. It's a nice, good brain rot, pick up and play, chill and relax kind of game. You know, and it's cool too because like oh I got 5 minutes to kill. Let's play a little Dig Dug. It was just another one of those games where it's just like you could play it for 5 minutes, you can play it for 5 days, you can play it for forever. It certainly feels like forever. Sure, the levels were kind of short and easy, but based upon my research, it says it has a total of 255 levels. Like, mind you, this was a day before save states, before memory cards, before internal batteries. Like, there was no saving. If you die or if you decide to turn it off or stop playing, you're back at level one. So if you're at level 254, just one level away from beating the game, or even if let's say you are at level 255 and that's the last level and you beat the whole game, you die, game over, back to level one. It was just a different time. And that's how games like this not only accumulated that money, but became addicting. It's just like, man, I just got to get further. I got to get further. I got to get the high score. Got to get the points here. But it was cool because Dig Dug has inspired uh, some games. Like you have this own little spin-offs, and there's a Dig Dug Part 2. There's a second Dig Dug. Uh, but like one of the spin-offs, I wouldn't necessarily call it a spin-off, but like it's definitely inspired by Dig Dug, and that's Mr. Driller. So if anybody remembers playing Mr. Driller on like the PlayStation back in the day, I think it was on the Game Boy as well. But Mr. Driller was inspired by Dig Dug, and when you play it, you can kind of tell, you can kind of feel that it is because it has that similar style. You're digging down and through obstacles and whatnot, and enemies. Speaking of the enemies, there was two kinds of enemies in Dig Dug. You have the pukas, yeah, the pukas, which were those little round shaped ones that had the goggles, you know. And then you have the Figars. The Figar is the dragon, obviously, the little green dragon that breathed fire. And of course, if you get to a certain point in the level, if you kill your first enemy or whatever, what the enemies will do is they won't stay because when you start the level, they're kind of in their stations, if you want to call them that, their positions on the level. And you always dig straight down. You come across a screen at the very top and you dig straight down in the middle and then you stop. And then that's when the level starts. That's when you can start playing. The objective to get to the next level, what you have to do is to eliminate all the enemies. As the levels go on, obviously, the harder the game gets. So there's going to be more enemies and they move faster. So what they do is these enemies, they don't dig like you do. They just kind of transform into these weird shapes and it kind of just float across the screen to your position or to the top of the screen. So the objective is to A, not let the enemies touch you because you'll die, or B, not let them escape the level. So if they make it all the way to the top of the screen, which is the very base, the very top, and then they just walk off the screen, well then you lose because they escaped. You can't do that. You gotta eliminate all the enemies. You gotta kill them all before you can go ahead and move on and progress to the next level. As this game was, I never beat the game personally. I played a lot of it, but as the game consistently goes and goes and goes, there's going to be more enemies. They move faster, and they're gonna like float to your position or whatever a lot sooner. So like in the very first level, it may take a few seconds. Like you have time to kill about, I think you start off with four enemies in the first level. I think you have enough time to kill two of them before the other two start to float your direction to go after you or to escape. But like once you get to like level 10, the second the level starts, they start floating immediately. Like you have to start killing them, you know. Stake out your little air hose, push the button until they get bigger and bigger and bigger and pop like a balloon. That's how you eliminate them. Another way you can eliminate them is through craft and like crafty, which is some of these levels have big rocks underground, and you can dig underneath the rock, and then the rock would fall, and if you time it just right, you place it just right, squish the enemy. So like an environmental takedown. Personally, I think that's cool, but it's like it's just faster for me to go right to them and just like blow them up with my air hose. Watch them pop like a balloon. When they're floating, they change characters. So like the Pukas, which is like I said, the little round guy with the goggles, he just turns into the goggles and he floats towards your direction, and then the Figars turn into a face, with black eyes and a black mouth, and it's a face like an evil smiley face, and it's coming towards you. But while they're in that position, while they're in that, I guess, mode or what you want to call it, where they're not full form, you can still catch them and blow them up right there. Once that air hose makes connect, you just keep tapping a button till they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then boom, pop, they're gone. It's a very simple game, you know, very simple. Don't let them escape. Don't let them touch you. Walk up to them, push the button, keep pushing them until they pop. That's it. You get points. And these old school arcade games was like I said about high scores, but also how far you can get in the game. Can you beat the game? Can you do all 255 levels? Can you stand there for that long and survive off of one quarter or one token or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like it took a lot of patience and a lot of skill for these arcade games, and it still does. Because like even though if like you're playing it on your Switch, your Nintendo Switch or your PS5 or whatever, like sure it's a controller and your motor skills are a lot more complex compared to what it was in the 80s, but it's still like just one button and one joystick to move the people, move the guy. That's all it is. So it's still the same game. It's just a direct port. So what you play is still, the 1982 original version just on a 2026 console. So it's that same game, just different technology, and it still requires, skill and speed and timing and just thought to not only sit there and blast through because like I mean sure you can probably do save states or rewind. I know like the Switch does like a rewind. But still, like the same rules apply. Like if you lose all your lives, back to level one you go. These old school games showed no mercy. It was all about how many quarters you put into the machine, how much money can it make, how many units can it sell. You know, if let's just say there's a let's say a little corner store on the corner of the street, and it's a couple blocks away. There's a laundromat that has a dig dug machine, and then a few blocks from there, there's a bowling alley that has a dig dug machine. Of course, there's an arcade somewhere that has a dig dug machine, and you see it pop up everywhere. You see people are playing it. There's people surrounding it. You're gonna want one too. You invest in that and see how much money it makes and brings people in. But it's Dig Dug, just like Pac Man and Space Invaders, they were everywhere. It was a game that people familiarized with pretty quickly. And then once it became on home consoles, now it was a little controversial once they made home console ports, like for the Atari and whatnot, because there was no like console exclusives. Like apparently some games were different once they hit console. Like sure, the arcade version may have this kind of music, this kind of graphics, and maybe these type of levels, but like we'll put it on home console, like we'll add different levels, we put in different music or whatever, different sprites. But Dig Dug on the home console was a direct port. So like some people were upset was like, I just put in like $3 into the machine at the arcade to play this game on the arcade machine, but yet I paid like 15-20 dollars for the cart at the time. I don't know how much a cart Atari games cost back then to play it on my TV at home, and like it's the same game. Like I would much rather spend the $3 or the 50 cents or the 25 cents than to pay all this money to play a game that's not that much different. Like, sure, I may be able to beat the game this time because there's no line behind me and I'm not paying consistently, but at the same time, it's like, what are the chances you beating a game when you own it versus beating a game on one quarter? Like, you can still, it still requires you to do it in that one sitting, you know? There's no, like I said, there's no saving your progress. You get on level 255, you're playing on the Atari and you lose all your lives, you're back at level 1. You get to level 233 and you're playing and the power goes out, you're back to level 1. If you made it to level 150 and you just decide not to play, like, okay, I'm done, I'm going to bed, come back the next morning, you're back at level 1. So it still requires you to sit there the entire time to beat all 255 levels. But it's just the way of the times, man. That's just how games decided to make their money. Because the technology wasn't there yet to save your progress. Like, none of that came until Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, when some of the games had internal save batteries inside the cartridge itself. And not every game had the power to do that. Like, Super Mario did it. I believe Sonic the Hedgehog did it. But, like, the NES days, that's still the 80s. And no, you couldn't save your progress. So if you're playing The Legend of Zelda, which is a long ass game, especially for the time, and you got to go to bed because you got to go to work or school the next morning, and you come back, you're back at level 1, like you just put the game in. And it's just, it requires a lot of patience and skill to beat all these levels. I mean, Dig Dug is a pretty simple game, very simple concept. But it's like, I can only imagine what level 255 looks like. How many enemies are on the screen, how fast are they moving, because like they can get to a certain point where, like, let's just say there's 7 enemies on the screen, you kill 2 of them, and then now the remaining 5 are coming all at you at once. So they start to they get in that little transformation and they start to float towards you, and they're coming all at you at once. So now you got 5 enemies charging you at the same time, and you have one air hose. And the thing is, you better be quick with that air hose. You got to tap that button as fast as possible, because if they touch you, you die. Sure, you get to restart the level, but I think just like any other classic arcade game, you get 3 lives. Lose all 3 lives, it's bye bye. You know, and I believe I've never had this happen to me on Dig Dug, but I'm sure if you get enough points or whatever, you get an extra life, like you do in Pac-Man and whatnot. But I can only speak for what I know, because I never made it to level 255, because I'm just I just don't see a reason to stand there. Sure, it'd be cool, but it's like, well, nowadays we have YouTube. I can just go on YouTube and see what level 255 looks like. I'm not going to sit there the whole time. I just can't sit there with any game. Well, sure, I can probably burn maybe an hour on a game max nowadays. When I was a kid, I can do it younger. When I was young, when I was young, I do it for a lot longer. I can burn a few hours on a game versus me now. I can do maybe 30 minutes to an hour, then I'm done. I got my fix. Come back tomorrow, maybe. It's just different now. But like, to sit there the whole 255, like, I like to see a speed run of this game, because like the part is like getting to enemies and blowing them up, sure, but like, you have to keep tapping that button and tapping it until they blow up. That can be time consuming. You got to fast tap the shit out of that. It's you just learn how to do that. Of course, if you want to say, oh, the faster I tap it, the faster it blows up. It's just adaptation. Like, we learn how to work our fingers through video games, thanks to games like Dig Dug, or thanks to having home consoles and controllers. But this is a game you definitely got to give it its flowers. Help create the golden age of arcades. Many of us have memories with arcade. Like I said, if you remember, if you go back a few episodes to my episode about the arcades and going there and actually leaving the house to play some games, like I said, I came up and I caught the ass end of that. Like, there were still arcades around, not as many, but there's still a few that you can go to and play some. And like I said, at the end episode, it wasn't just like skee ball and air hockey. Sure, they had that, but they had, Pac Man and Dig Dug and Frogger. They had some of the classics. Got to experience what it was like back then when my parents were teenagers or whatnot. So as a kid, you thought that was cool, but you're a kid. You're easily impressive. It's like, oh, a video game, cool. But I want to say this game was it Dig Dug on Stranger Things that the episode where we meet Max and Dustin was like, oh, somebody named Mad Max beat my high score. Was it Dig Dug? I'm gonna have to I'm looking it up right now. Yes. Yep. So it was season 3? Was it season 3? Where we met Max, they went to the arcade and Dustin had the high score and Dig Dug. Might have been season 3. I just looked the shit up and I just all I see it was Dig Dug Stranger Things and it popped up. So that's all I really looked at. So yeah, that was my confirmation for me. But it was sure like Stranger Things was based in the 80s, but the 70s and 80s and whatnot, but it's like it's played today. So there's kids that I know. I have younger relatives that are in elementary school that are fans of Stranger Things. They watch it and they mesmerized by its surrealism. But it's like you'll see they're playing Dig Dug, so now they're exposed to the arcades, they're exposed to Dig Dug. Like now they're familiarized like with this. Even if their only reference to Dig Dug is Stranger Things, they can still kind of piece together. Oh, it's an old game on an arcade. I'm like, yeah, it's like you have an idea, you know, like it's 2026. We're almost halfway through the year. Dig Dug is still brought up, still talked about. People still know what it is. Is it like super relevant? I wouldn't say, because like it's all about the Xbox and the Switch and the PS5 and but Dig Dug, and all these RPGs like Elden Ring and what have you, Mario, and of course like Gears and Halo and all that good shit. But Dig Dug is still there. All these classics are still kind of hiding in the shadows, poke their head out every once in a while. People still buy them and play them. It's cool. For multiple generations, and we all know Dig Dug, and that's why I give it its flowers. These classics, I'm giving them their flowers now before they become so obsolete to a point where possibly the next generation may not even hear about Pac-Man. Like it could get to a point where we talk about Pac-Man or Dig Dug or Frogger, and it sounds like we're just making this shit up because there's nowhere to find it now. Which that could be wrong thanks to books and people like me who collect and preserve games. Like, oh, we're not gonna forget that shit. We're not gonna forget where it started to where it is now. Quite the evolution with technology. But I'm going ahead and kind of cap it off. Give Dig Dug his flowers, shouting out the golden age of arcade gaming, and shout out to games that you can just pick up and play, to where your 3-year-old brother can play all the way up to grandma. Grandma can play this. You just need a way to move the character and a way to blow up the enemies. So just one button. That's it. It's the simplest game other than Pac-Man, where you don't need any buttons. All right. This I gave this game its bouquet of flowers. Now it's time for me to do my plugs, and I'm gonna head out here. Thank you all for listening. I'm genuinely happy seeing my downloads go up, my Spotify downloads at least. With the other platforms I'm on, looking at the analytics of everything is kind of confusing. Because if I go to Spotify, it's just boom right there in front of me. It's just so much easier. I'm seeing my downloads go up. We broke 100 downloads, and we're getting close to 200 now. Because I think I broke 150, so like we're getting closer to 2. It's cool, you know. Shout out my YouTube channel, Kevin Gill Gaming. I'm seeing my subscriber counts go up there. My channel is almost at 100,000 views. That's awesome. Uh, Shout out to my Instagram and my Facebook, my socials, Kevin Gill Gaming. All my sources have the same profile picture, so you know where you're at. I know some people like to change up their shit, but I keep mine pretty consistent because it's just easier for both sides. Uh, but it's awesome. Nice to know you people are having as much fun with this as I am. To the point where my followers, my subscribers, my views, my likes, my plays, my everything are just going up and up. I just love it. Nice to know that sure, you could say yeah, it's video games, and of course everyone has this hobby, but just the fact that you guys like listen to me talk about it as much as you like to play it, sure, that's a different story, but it's cool. I enjoy it. All right, Joe. I'm out.